Good afternoon. It's 8 o'clock. It's 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. YouTube, Facebook Live, Dialogue with Dozell. We are on the air. We see our guest is here. We're going to get right into it. And you saw how we promote the show. Tonight, the Executive Director of Faith in Florida, Pastor Rhonda Thomas, is going to be with us tonight. And she is going to share with us remedies for your governor in the state of Florida removing Black history or very vastly diminishing Black history in Florida classrooms. She has come up with a great solution and it's spreading like wildfire across this country. And she's going to share it with everybody. Pastor Rhonda, how are you tonight, ma'am?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great now. I saw you on. I was just so enthusiastic, and my main man Reverend Al, we saw you on there, and
Okay.
we're gonna go further in depth than what his time allowed.
Okay. All right.
He missed out, and I'm gonna relay that to him. He missed out on a whole lot of good information and good things that you're doing. We'll get it done though. Pastor Rhonda is the Executive Director of Faith in Florida. She's held various positions. She was with us just in June talking about Florida's assault on democracy. And tonight, she is going to concentrate primarily on one of the remedies for making sure that Black history is taught to our young people since it's no longer in the school. Pastor, just start out and just go where you need to go.
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me, and I do look at it as an opportunity, and I'm so grateful to you and your leadership and what you bring to our community as well as to Faith in Florida. So, as you know, it went in effect with all the other interesting bills that was passed that went in effect in July. Um, the thought of erasing or eliminating or watering down Black history being, taught in our public school system and universities was just an insult to Black people overall. Um, we set up and we scheduled and we tried to do our very best in meeting with the Board of Education. We set up a meeting with some faith leaders in Tallahassee, and then it was a meeting here in Miami Gardens, hoping that he would attend. And for whatever reason, he did not make either of those meetings. If we could sit and talk, and I just believe that we could sit and talk, and at the table of brotherly love, can we come to some type of reasoning on how this can be done differently, opposed to totally erasing, ignoring it, or watered down version of the teaching of Black history. That did not happen. So I had to go forward because we know that that was not a done deal in the way of how history will be shared with our children. So God gave me a vision, and I want to give God all the credit for it. That what we do in Faith in Florida, we had the rod in our hand, and that is we organize multiracial, multi-faith congregations around racial, social, and economic justice. So I asked my team, my research team, if they can come up with a toolkit, not a curriculum, a toolkit of teachings and videos and materials that we can give to our churches and ask our churches to teach Black history from a faith place and space. And the toolkit consists of teachings for children of all ages, adults, and then also realizing and recognizing that history still sit in our pews. And then it also gives the opportunity for some of our senior saints who can tell their own story and tell a story or tell the story of what took place in their own lives or their parents' lives and generations, and to also share that Black people did not benefit anything from being a slave. And who would come up with something so ridiculous? And if those benefits actually took place, we would be much further. Or can we offer those benefits to people who don't look like us? And so My goal was 500 congregations to teach Black history from our churches. And so far, I haven't met the goal, but I'm over halfway. And then we have white congregations as well who saw the moral part of it being wrong, who also signed up and registered to get the toolkit so they too can teach it, but they understood that they may not be able to teach it like the Black church, but they'll be able to teach it in a way of accountability. Now, the teaching of history, whether it's black, white, blue, or green, when you're doing something in decent and in order, it is not to offend anyone, but it exists. It is history. So you can't erase it just because you chose to pull it out of our public schools. It's not going to be erased, but it is history. And it can be taught in a way, if it does nothing but make one rethink some stuff or even question it in a way of wanting more. And so once we started in Florida, and that's what I really cared about, was because I felt like we were the only ones that was being picked on. I realized we're not. And so far over 22 other states, and it's not just the South, that has gone on our website, registered, and has hooked up with Faith in Florida and say, we too will teach Black history from our congregations in Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Arizona. I just couldn't believe it. That First of all eyes are on Florida once again, and once again they see the need, and from a faith lenses, we see the moral part of trying to erase this is wrong. We know that we're dealing with the replacement conspiracy theory. We know that we're dealing with the critical race theory, all of these theories um, that does not impact Black people overall in a positive way, but more of a way of, we can't replace white people. Let's just be honest. We don't even desire to replace them. There's no desire there, I'm going to replace you. But there is a desire that we deserve a piece of the pie. There is a desire that we did build this country free on our back. There is a desire that we deserve to be treated equal and fair. There's a desire to recognize us as Black, intelligent Black men and Black women. There's a desire there for that. We understand that this country is full of racism,
So,
and it probably will never go away. But you can't erase the history, and racism was based, I mean, it was built on racism and it still exists. And so
so, so the former president did an outstanding job of stoking the fires of replacement theory. If you remember, the very first controversy he had as president was the Charlottesville uh, protest, and the words that were spoken from the white supremacists was, "Jews will not replace us." Well, they feel the same way about we African Americans. So, Pastor, I wanted to ask you. You started out by saying that this is a toolkit and not a curriculum.
yeah.
Could you distinguish between the two, please?
Yes, our educators really operate from a curriculum.
Okay.
Lesson one, A, B, C, D, and they're going to teach from that curriculum that was created to get a student to whatever next level to pass a test, and a curriculum. That's what our educators do, a lot of their teaching based on curriculums. Faith in Florida, we're not educators. We're preachers that teach the gospel. We're organizers. We teach our families, our children, but not in the way that our educators do. But what we could do and what we did was to get a list of materials that will help our faith leaders choose whatever they want to choose, and it will be a start, a way of assisting them. And we didn't choose a curriculum because we didn't want it to be where we're responsible to continue to keep the curriculum going, but we just wanted to be able to give them the materials they need where they can teach it the way God has given them. And because of the Black church has always been the most creative
Yes.
organ organization. We can teach it through the word. We can teach it through art. We can teach it through dance. We can teach it through personal experiences because it sits on our they sit on our pews. And so it wasn't to put our faith leaders in a box, but it was to give them that liberation that they need to teach it as God give them. And we just wanted to be able to give them something to where they could start. They could go through and say, okay, we're going to start in our youth Sunday school class.
Wow.
And then there's teaching on every level, whether it's a baby in elementary school or someone in high school or someone that has been out of school like me 40 years plus. That I just invited my son to teach a Black history um, um, lesson to my church, and he taught me stuff that I had never heard of.
Wow. Wow.
Because I had no idea how many slaves King James had. And
Mm.
we studied from King James. He taught that. He taught the history of Dade, who Mr. Dade is, who Mr. Perrine is. And he did a comparison of the Negro War that took place during the Seminole in the I-4 corridor. And he was able to make it plain using Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman with what took place. He talked about Overtown in Miami-Dade that once was colored town, and how what I-95 done to a economic growing city for Black folks, where entertainers like James Brown and Aretha Franklin, that's the only place they can go and entertain. So he made it real, he made it good, and he made it to a place where you were sitting on the edge of your seat just wanting more. And so it was to give that type of creativity.
I'm so intrigued in what you're saying and excited. I'm a fairly recently retired educator, and when I got stuck back in the classroom, I got back into the FCAT box. And you talk about the lack of freedom and flexibility. You had a very rigid curriculum that, and really, if you remember, a lot of educators talk, well, we don't get to really teach the subject, we teach to a test. So hearing the creativity that this toolbox offers. And by the way, let me just say, I'm going to do my part with my small congregation, but I understand that you have congregations that have signed on that are not Black. And I'm volunteering to you to assist one of those congregations. I'm volunteering my services if they could be helpful.
Well, first of all, we don't look at the size of a church, because I know it's some big hearts in small congregations.
Yes, ma'am.
And we appreciate, and that church mean to me, your church with what you call small means just as much as a mega church. Well, that's the way I see it.
That's my heart for pastoring. Everybody in there, they represent and I've been in the much larger church settings, and so I didn't intend for that to come across. Like, I'm just saying, I'm going to do that part with our congregation.
Okay,
but I would like to go across the tracks, because I know they have volunteered and are signing up. As they're taking on the toolkit, if they needed a facilitator, I'm volunteering also.
Okay.
Yeah, all right. They are and will continue to be taken care of. I'm just so intrigued by the creativity of the toolbox method. And you talking about what your son was stuff that, and I'm a student of history, was just intriguing for me, and to tie it in with something as contemporary as Trayvon Martin. What is that now, about 15 years?
Yeah, and he and Trayvon was friends.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so for him to tie that in, when Trayvon was murdered, they were in high school, and by the time the verdict came out, he was already at Florida A&M University, and that verdict was harder on him than I think attending the funeral. But it changed his life.
Wow.
and it changed his life in a positive way. It's several things changed his life. I can remember him not liking school in elementary, and then he got his first African American male teacher that changed
Oh,
the
wow.
way he saw education, and then for him to be able to attend one of the best HBCUs that sit on the highest hill changed his life.
Yeah.
And then the impact of the death of his friend Trayvon Martin changed his life. And so now you're talking about a 28-year-old is talking about black wealth,
Wow.
generational wealth,
That's awesome.
um, the um, the value of black lives and what we bring into a room. And so to give him that opportunity, it was his first time, and he had us on the edge of his seat. He's coming back to do part two. And so I'm just excited that he has a desire, the knowledge and the wealth that's wrapped in him. I'm excited about that. And then the fact that he's sharing that's drawing other young people. Um, because for the first session to hear other young people say, I want to try that. I want to teach a session of Black
Oh,
history.
wow.
And I'm like, okay, you got to study because I need to, you can't bring no craziness now. And they go, no. So that, look at the platform
Yeah.
and look at what it's doing. And and he made it so real. He was able to talk about his grandmother, my mother-in-law, who still have her ID that she needed to use to go on South Beach. You know how
Wow.
many young people didn't even know Black people was not allowed on South Beach, Miami Beach, and any other part of the beach? And
And you know how recent that was.
that's right. We couldn't go across that bridge. And then if you went across, you had to have purpose. And that purpose back then was really to clean the houses of white people. And then you
Goodness.
had to be back before the sun set. And
Yes.
you dare not get stuck on that beach. And so that's history for Black people. That's history for people that lived in Florida, lived in South Florida.
So my mother, along with that, and of course, I served as a policeman in Daytona Beach, and I was there 97 years ago. But I was so shocked to hear, and every so often, my dear white brothers would remind us that it wasn't too long ago that we couldn't even patrol the other side of the bridge, and then with that, people would let us know that it was just a few minutes ago that they were able to go over there, and some were still not comfortable being over there after dark. And my mother related a story to me. She relocated to Florida to teach at Boylan Haven School in Jacksonville, and this was in the 50s, late 50s. And she related to me that she went to the beach with some of her white contemporaries and was told very politely that you're not allowed here, and then not allowed, because not allowed to. I think they went to get a burger, and she was reminded that her skin color disqualified her from doing that in the city. And I'm old enough to remember when I remember the fountains. I remember places that we couldn't go, and I very proudly say this about my daddy because it was ahead of time. Because this was just his personality. Uh, we were directed to the back door at a doctor's office. And my daddy said, well, none of my boys will ever go to your back door for your service. We'll find somebody else. And it takes that kind of defiance and however it's expressed. And
Yeah.
I like to rely on Malcolm X's by any means necessary, the appropriate means for the appropriate time. So I said all that to say this. Your son he's 28 years old, and he's almost an anomaly because I deal with a group of young people. I'm in the school system now as a coach, and with doing registration, I deal with young people who not only have no knowledge of this, they have no connection to it. They have no affinity. I don't know if their parents is, but so it's such an alien and a foreign concept to them that you have to go back and be willing to go back and teach the history and bringing up the data is find a point of connection with them. And I just want to ask you, what are some of the challenges you see in Faith and Florida? As a fellow, I do it with the voting. I see that. But what are some of the challenges you see in reaching this generation?
Now there are some challenges, yeah. And one of the things that I do know with this generation, because I also have a youth department from the age of 14 who I personally taught them how to do youth organizing. So they can do organizing in their schools, in their community based on things that they encounter. Um, there is a group that they just don't know. But it became alarming when you talk to some of these young people, these children more so, when the only thing they could relate Dr. King to is a parade.
Mm.
And then to share with them what they think happened long time ago is not really that far, and so but what they've done is created systems to modernize slavery where it don't look like it once, well, that happened a long time ago. No, 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 all they did was modernize it, and so you have to be able to share something that's relatable with our young people to just to get their attention, And I started out with my youth department doing a summer program, asking them, had they ever experienced racism? And I was really thinking they were going to say no.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to hear that it was not a no,
Wow.
said volumes. Number two, I asked the second question: did they ever think? Do they think we will ever dismantle racism in this country? And they said no, and had reasons why. And we're talking about 13, 14-year-olds.
Wow.
But they have been exposed because they're exposed to racism in class and school. They're able to identify and see how they're being treated different. And just not too long ago, Faith in Florida got involved. Um, when I say maybe it was last year, it was right during the George Floyd verdict, waiting for that, somewhere up in there, and in the Treasure Coast area of Florida, um, where these kids in high school, middle school, did a fundraiser in their school they made a sign, these big letters that they make when it's graduation. And what
Right.
they did was
Yards.
they got the support of their art teacher, and they spelled out the word Nigger and put it on the field of the school so people can see it. But they said they did it as a fundraiser because they were able to sell nigger passes. If you bought a pass from them for $15, you get to say that word all day in school.
Wow.
And,
Wow.
and so, we were shocked. So, Faith in Florida got involved because we demanded a school board meeting, an emergency meeting. This was offensive and the whole what we do. But to know that some kids can identify it and some cannot. And so that makes it a little more difficult to keep the attention of the history. But then you have to relate it that we're not that far from it. We're not that far from repeating. And so, I mean, and what is it that they can relate to? We've also in our program have had chaplains to say they wanted to sign on so they could teach Black history to those that are incarcerated.
Okay.
And so just to show you that the lives that could be touched, but yet we still have a work to do. I'm not saying we've reached the mountaintop, but it's a start. It's really a start.
Pastor, we're going to come back on the other side of the break, and I want to pick back up with the young people. I'm going to ask you, what are some of the other ways that they have felt racism or seen racism? and some of the antidotes for that, and just the overall feelings, because you're actually schooling me, because I've not dealt with it to the point where I've even got that kind of passion about it, response, and I've had to provide the passion. And I don't know, maybe I'm 99 years old and unable to relate that now. But so I want to talk about that. We also want to talk about some of the other states and that have. I know you mentioned New Jersey and Pennsylvania. We want to talk about these states and their level of connection to what we're doing here. So just on the other side of the break, our guest is our very beloved, my boss lady, Pastor Rhonda Thomas, who's the executive director of Faith in Florida. We'll be right back with the dialogue. GoGetGoodWorld.com. They got every one of your virtual needs. You need to contact them right now. The two Toyas and Markia and Company, and they'll make you look as good as they make this show look at our other ventures that they do here on Mondays and our Sunday platforms. GoGetGoodWorld.com. They'll make you look real good and take care of you. I want to. We have 2 more weeks that we're actually the nights that we meet. And tonight I want to honor our Hispanic brothers and sisters, as this is Hispanic Awareness Month. And I just want to do our part of National Hispanic Heritage Month. I want to make sure Hispanic American Heritage Month. Featured before you is one of my absolute heroes. You see the black and white picture because that was an era. He died in the 60s, early 70s, actually. That's Cesar Chavez. Cesar Chavez was a union leader, primarily located in California. And one of the things he did was the migrant workers who work with, they pick beans and fruits and so forth in California. He represented them. And Cesar Chavez's abilities reached beyond just the Hispanic community. He was seen and known nationally and was a threat to economic platforms that were not fair to workers, kind of like what we see going on in Michigan right now, and the Writers Guild out in California. But Cesar Chavez was an absolute hero to many of us, and it's just too bad that during that day, his abilities could not be used to go beyond the work that he did in California. That's Cesar Chavez. Also, Alexander Ocasio-Cortez, thanks for putting it up, because we're so used to hearing her as AOC. She is currently a congressperson from, she's a congresswoman from the state of New York. AOC, as she's referred to, is a member that the other side of the aisle has unaffectionately referred to as the squad, because there were 4 young women that came in at about the same time, and they were very passionate about the needs of the last, the least, and the left out. And so anytime you do that, that group that wears red usually will find a way to depict you as anything other than a good American. And we salute her tonight for the work that she's still doing in Congress, representing the state of New York, a district in New York, but really representing all of America as she fights for justice. Also, you know her. That's the very beautiful and talented Miss Jennifer Lopez. We know as J-Lo. She got her national prominence in Living Color, and she went on to become an actress, and she's an outstanding dancer. J-Lo's work has gone beyond. She has built a brand that goes beyond the entertainment industry. She's one of the minority owners. When I say minority, I mean financial minority owners, along with Venus and the Williams sisters of the Miami Dolphins. And she has done everything to uplift not only the people whose lineage is like hers, but all Americans, because she happens to be a woman and she's been very intelligent with her brand. That's Jennifer Lopez. And ultimately, tonight, we remember the late, great Freddie Prinze, who brought a lot of laughter to us on Friday nights. Those of you all who've been around as long as I have, he was he came on Friday nights, 8:30 after Sanford and Son, and brought a lot of laughter and lifted up the Hispanic American community. And he set the stage for many that we know now, Mendez and others who now follow because of the trail that he blazed. And these are just four, but they're far more, and we're almost getting beyond, but we have to honor their heritage and what they're about and what they do, because they have proved excellent in what they do. And we'll talk more next week about Hispanic American Heritage Month. We will not be remiss of honoring these folk. So back to the dialogue tonight, Pastor Rhonda. I wanted to ask you about our young people. What were some of well, let me just start the segment by saying my daughters, Madam Producer, Toya, they were probably, oh my goodness, it was before we left the state of Florida for me to go off to grad school. They probably were not even 10 years old at the time, maybe 8, 7, 9 or something like that. The night, if I could do the math, I'd do it quickly. The night of the first King celebration. And I remember, you're saying that a lot of our youth only relate to the parade. That day, we sat down and we looked at TV all day. And I told them the historical significance of why this day was so important. It was one of the days that, I don't know, when Stevie Wonder and others were back 10 years fighting that fight to get Dr. King's birthday. They noted as a holiday. It's something that I really never thought I'd see in this nation. And so we have a group of youth now that we're challenged to educate. And what were some of the things that they said to you, and what were some of the ways that they thought to combat? You listed a few, but could you expound on that, please?
Yeah. Well, I had in my summer program, it was very intentional of what I wanted to cover, and the parents had to agree. And my goal was to really stretch their thinking, and then giving them something positive to do, an assignment. So I just literally taught them how to organize. But I came up with topics that impacts them. And so one was reducing gun violence and mass incarceration, because they're impacted by gun violence, and unfortunately, many of our kids are being incarcerated at such a young age. So that was that. Then we talked about racism and dismantling it in this country, and have they ever been exposed to racism? We talked about immigration, because I had Black and brown children that was a part, and so the immigrant kids didn't realize that gun violence in some of our Black children in their communities was a norm. And then our Black children did not understand what immigrant children went through, and they became advocates for one another. And so that made me that taught me something, where it was easier to sit at a table with children to get them to see things differently than it is some of our adults. And then we talked about voting and the oppression, and how hard we had to fight to get that right to vote. And then they're not old enough to vote, but they understand that it didn't come easy. And it just changed. They just picked it up. They picked it up. But what was so important for me was that I not do all the talking. And that I shut up and listen. And oh my God, when I tell you the classroom changed, where I was taking notes, because I knew it was things that they were bringing up that was part of history that I didn't even know. I didn't know nothing about whitewashing, and I didn't know anything about the brown paper bag, And so when they saw that I sat at the table of wisdom and listened to them, it just changed the whole game. Where now I'm literally having an intelligent conversation with a group of kids that brought something to the table that I can learn from. And it just changed it. So I started that program in 2021. Do you know those kids are still with me?
Wow.
One of them is now she's 18. I hired her.
Wow.
She's my executive assistant, but that's where it started.
Wow.
And so when you have kids that say, nobody listens to us. And I said, well, I'm going to listen to you all. It made a difference. And many times we want them to think like we think, do what we do, behave like, but they dealing with a whole different kind of devil out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so who really takes the time to listen? And we'll be surprised what we can get. And once they trust you, oh, it's a whole different thing. But it's hard for them to trust. It did not mean I agreed or they know discipline comes but I just chose to take a different approach. And I told them I want them to be so well rounded that they will never be intimidated based on the color of their skin.
That's awesome.
So, and it worked.
so Pastor, anticipating that I would be here for a few minutes by myself, and thank you that you spared me of that the night. I was going to come on with my little dialogue about how sad I am about the state of America today. I've never been one to wave a flag or I've never been this super patriot. I stand for the national anthem because my dad was going to crucify me one time at a football game that I wasn't. He came down. I was a mascot for the football team, and I was sort of football on the sideline, and he came as ex-Marine. He came down and very quickly corrected me about that. So I honor him. I honor my brother, who's a former Marine, and every service person. I'm ex-officer. You know, we honor everybody. But my frustration is that usually, and I got to see this early. I went on the police department when I was 21 years old. I got to see, and I kind of thought that I was dealing in some racism, but it has bared out 40 years later through social media, and that I get to see some of these people and what they think, and it just bored me out. God granted me wisdom back then to be able to detect it and discern that. But I never thought that we would be in a battle for democracy, that this nation would. So I thought 2008 jumped the gun. I never thought that I'd see a black president in my lifetime. I thought the extent, and I'm a person of faith. I'm a person of faith that I know that God can do anything. I just thought that God escalated the hands of time. When Jesse Jackson won the Maine and the Michigan and a few other primary states, I thought that would be the apex until maybe my children or my children's children might see a black president emanate. Only to see us reach these milestones, and then it's not just about a black president, it's about a nation coming together and said, I'm going to do what Martin said. I'm going to elect somebody on the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. And then, sadly, 8 years later, that gets turned back because a candidate appeals to the very worst in Americans, and these people rise up. And so now you see the polls. This man can do anything, but because he has appealed to that base is coming out. What can we do to negate? We have the numbers. I was encouraged with the George Floyd protest because we weren't the leading people, as you saw protests not only around the nation but around the world. We saw more people who didn't look like us than people who did look like us. So that was reaffirming. But what can we do voter involvement wise, and voters certainly a part of it, because they have no idea about the suppression that's going on, that taking us back to where we were in 1963. Yeah.
It's discouraging. it's very discouraging because I do know that we can make a difference. Several things that I think need to happen in whether it's in just looking at the state of Florida or the country overall. And I want to start with the state of Florida first. Number one, I think that our faith leaders can do more. Our congregations, we were the influencers.
Yes.
You know, Sunday, the church owned Sunday. Now the NFL owns Sunday, Jazz in the Garden owns Sunday. You know, it's just broken up in all kind of pieces, right? Then the church used to own Sunday. And I think that as we're building these kingdoms, is that it's some things that's going. You know, I think of a training that I took and around racism, and it was an older white man that wanted to make a point that was one of the facilitators, and he said, and this was in fact, it was the year Trayvon Martin passed. He says that black folks are in more danger now than they were in the 50s and 60s. Yep, that's what he said. And then we took this training through the People's Institute, and one of the white facilitators said, um, he said that beside us, he said that a poor white man had more privileges than a rich black man. And I think that we need to rethink some stuff on where we really are. Um, where we will really, really be conscious of where we really are. Um, in a way of just because they've allowed us to come on their beaches and sleep in their hotels and eat in their restaurants, we have not yet arrived because they're steady creating and recreating systems
Yes.
that often hurt us. And so when we really, really take a good reality check and look at where we are, we can do more and we can definitely do more. Not just registering to vote, but literally vote. Registering is one thing, but if you don't really operate in it, will we really miss it if it's taken away?
Yes.
You know, I don't think we think along those lines. Um, I don't care how much money we make, they're still going to put a cap on us. I don't care what neighborhood you live in.
Yes.
They're still trying to figure out how you got here
Yes.
and not look at our works so I can live wherever I want to live. And then we have stopped teaching our children our rich history and where they come from.
Yes.
And so it's just so many things that I think we still need to do as a people. And we have to be just that determined as when they took over, when the insurrection took place, and I was in the middle of a staff retreat, and one of my staff stopped and said, "You might want to take a look at this because they've taken over the Capitol." And I'm like, "What you mean they're taking over?" So they're climbing the wall, and you know what? First of all, I didn't stop to take a look. All I knew is, oh, black people, we don't do stuff like that. First of all, we ain't messing up our sneakers to climb the wall. And once we get to the top, how we gonna get down? You know, a whole lot of stuff just stood out instantly for me that I knew who it wasn't what group. Number one, they actually lived and survived to take over the Capitol. Well, no, I knew they wasn't black.
Right.
First of all, you wouldn't have lived to tell the truth, to tell the story. Where was the bus, the paddy wagon that would have those that did survive being hauled off to jail? You know, so I just knew. And so when you just start thinking of the real reality of where we are, where we've come from, and we have come a long way, but we haven't gotten to where we really need to be and should be. And so to see the impact of watching where democracy is, one of my colleagues asked, will there even be a democracy in 10 years? Will there be a public education system in 10 years? What will we be in 10 years if we don't get a hold of what's really happening? And so, I'm just, I, I wear the hat and the shoes of an angry black woman. I wear it. I wear it with pride and dignity. They, a lot has happened to make me angry.
Wow.
And so, but I don't have to stay angry or wear it on me. Where it just that anger, I just take that and use it to fight that much harder to bring change.
So, Pastor, one of the things that I was a little disappointed on Politics Nation yesterday was they played the clips of some of the statements that Senator Tim Scott made in last Wednesday night's debate. But the one I didn't hear, and I hope I missed it, was the one where he said that America is not a racist nation.
Oh, I'm trying to see. Yeah, they played it. You missed it
Yeah,
because
okay.
I responded and said he need to take one of our Black History classes.
I heard that, and I thought, and I just didn't go back and rewind it because
Yeah, it really. He said, yeah, and I was like, oh man, this brother really needs some help. Um, and he said other things because he's, his campaign has literally text me for money where he made a statement. He's not an African American man; he's an American man.
oh my gosh.
I'm like, wow, he's pretty far out there. And see, I don't have the tolerance for stuff like that because I'm like, oh, So I responded to the text saying, "Don't ask me for no money because I don't sow into foolishness like this. You got an identity problem and you want to run for president, really?" And so, and I hate saying that because you look like me, even though you don't know and realize, um, you know, where's his mom? I need to talk to her. You know,
Phyllis is saying I have no respect for him. She's one of our loyal viewers. And Max said earlier he wrote in Lyndon Johnson, and in that debate, is this guy's name Ramaswamy or whatever his name is? He said that was the start of us becoming a dependent nation, which was of course, an attack at us because he called it the Great Society. The Great Society opened doors for us that had formerly been closed economically. Pastor, when you came on, you talked about, and I'm sure it was about every empowerment that Faith in Florida does. You listed economic education. What were they, please?
wait, say that again. I'm sorry.
You listed it sounded like it came right from our mission statement, Faith in Florida's mission statement.
Yeah, well, was it where I was stating what we organize around, which was racial, social, and economic justice?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. That's
okay.
Yeah. Could you just state in our audience? I mean, you're preaching to the choir, but hopefully this is something I can use with my young people. Can you please just re-emphasize the need for all of those? You just don't arrive. You said the NFL, so some people are impacted financially, while others of us are still living in the ghetto, and not because that's where we want to live, but that's where generationally that's as far as we have evolved to. Can you talk about the need for us to be empowered in these areas?
It's such a huge need. Racially, when we're being racially profiled, we're being left out of so much based on the color of our skin. We're not at the table making decisions and wonder why, because the decisions will be about us. Economically, we're not where we are. It's systems set up where we won't. Why do you think they're out there striking? That's an economic problem. Why do you think when they gentrify our communities, then they come back and revitalize once they move us out? Why don't you revitalize it while we're there? Right. But no, they gentrify it first. And so economically, when we start talking about generational wealth, it's a reason why I remain friends with my Jewish brothers and sisters, because I want to learn, because they master generational wealth. And then, so you got racial, economic, and social justice. We're always not included. Think about, well, you use the word ghetto, and I may use the word the hood no longer looks like the hood anymore. Mm-hmm. Where the Black community no longer looks like the Black community anymore. And why is it that? And some of it is strategic. Some of it is strategic where it has opened a door where others who normally would have never wanted to live in communities that were predominantly Black, but it changed it because even though they're not black, but it also changed it in the way we vote. Because they could be just as poor as a black person, but they vote differently.
Wow. Wow.
But yet they've moved in our neighborhood. And so I asked one pastor, I said, listen, when you're out here evangelizing and now that this community looks so different, do you knock on every door? Or are you still knocking on black doors?
Yeah, yeah.
And they're moving our neighborhood and won't come to our black church, but they right across the street from the church. And so I look at the neighborhood I once lived in and I say, God, if I was an organizer and on the ground, their doors would be the first ones I knock on. Because I want to know, welcome, number one, I don't know if you've been extended a heartfelt welcome to the hood.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, wow.
Yeah, and so what do you think of the hood? And so, have some real conversations on how did you get in this neighborhood?
Yeah.
And then why are you comfortable? Because they're very comfortable. And so, and what's the real plan?
Wow.
Remember, you know what? I can remember when my parents moved in our neighborhood, which was Liberty City. And at that time, Liberty City was predominant white. We're talking about March 10th, 1962. It was a white neighborhood, but yet it's now called Liberty City. We were the second people to move in our neighborhood on my street. It was in less than a year, they had all moved and it was now a black neighborhood. I remember asking my dad, why is it, I used to play with the little girl next door, why we're not playing anymore? And he had to break down and share with me that she can't come and play with you anymore because you're black. So I forced him to talk about racism. My dad used to work at Eastern Airline. Remember Eastern Airline?
Yes, ma'am. They still got an old plane out there at Metro Miami-Dade Airport.
Eastern Airline had 2 company picnics, one for the white, one for the black.
Wow.
And the one for the black is because black people in Miami could only go to Virginia Key Beach. So they had to do 2 picnics, one for us. And we were very happy and very content, with the black picnic at Virginia Key Beach. And we understood that's as far as we can go. And so I just think that we need to be so conscious because we as black people will spend our money anywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
Even if we can't afford it, we'll spend it there.
Right. That's right.
And look at who are we really making rich. And so it's just a lot. And I know I could be here all night.
Pastor, I want to do this. I want to, Bernard, and I have 2 questions I'm going to get you out on, so we'll be out on time. But Bernard asked this question, and I don't want him to think that I'm deferring this, but I want you to make a brief response to his comment. He says, teaching Black history in church should start with teaching Israel is North Africa and that the people in the Bible were Black. True or false? And I want to do a show with some of our Hebrew Israelite brothers and deal with those. But could you give him a brief response to that, please?
First of all, I totally agree that when we're talking about teaching Black history, we need to go back as far as I have several Bibles. I have books with Black people in the book, and notice that when other versions was written, it was watered down. The Ethiopia Bible, where some books are left out because if you put all those books in, then you had to talk about how the wealth of Black people biblically. And so I do think that churches should start teaching in a way of Israel is. I mean, I agree. And if we say we're not going to teach a watered down version and we want to teach it from biblically and go as far back as we could, it has to start with the Bible. Yeah, because some will be offended. When my son taught about how many slaves King James had, and it was certain parts that he wrote in the very Bible that we read and study from, he had to say it a certain way or it would have offended the slaves.
Yeah.
And so, and then you got some of us that's Christians, we're so religious. We're religious. to a point where we're no earthly good, where we want to really get into the details of where Black people really came from and the success of Black people.
And
And that's biblical.
unbelievable. Unbelievable. Pastor, I want to ask you these two questions, and we're going to get out. What are some of just share with us some of the comments that your contemporaries from other faith people in the faith network in other states are saying to you about the toolbox, and what are some of the things that they're asking about it?
Well, we have over 15 denominations that's teaching. Some I've never even heard of. I didn't even know they were denominations. So I'm learning. I'm in the classroom myself, and I'm like, okay, I'm like, I didn't even know what are you teaching? It just in general. So, but I have, when I think of my white congregations who see that this is morally wrong,
Yes.
And my Muslim brothers, and I'm not talking about the Nation of Islam, who's saying that we understand what hate is like. So they've made it relatable in a way that we got more in common than what separates us. So therefore, they don't have a problem teaching it in a way where it's real and people can literally receive, even if they're not African Americans.
Thank you, Pastor. I want to ask you this last question. We'll get you out of here.
And you can tell you're a preacher. We have 3 closings, and we still
you used that one the other day. And let me just say, last week's show we talked about it a little bit, but Pastor Rhonda chose to be here tonight. But she under her direction, my direct supervisor, Dr. LaVon Bracey, put together an awesome national voter registration program over in Eatonville, which is a historically the oldest Black settlement in the nation, if I'm not mistaken.
That's
and
right.
Pastor Rhonda, as usual, she brought that fire like y'all see she's bringing tonight, and just always inspirational. I hear her every Faith in Florida function, and I never cease to be inspired, and I mean that. And then she closes it out with the Sam Cooke. And I need to hear that because sometimes I just wonder,
That's right.
the song
That's right.
Changes Gonna Come. Changes
That's
Gonna Come.
right.
So with that being said, what is it going to take to keep Adam Gase out of the State House in 2026?
We're gonna have to get out. I don't know. We got to we're gonna have to do some more sitting down and teaching and strategizing in a way that it's real. Yeah, because when you look at Florida, what is it? 13% Black, 16% Latino.
Yes. We've lost a lot of that to this group.
And so we got to be willing to talk to the people on different sides to try to bring out the moral part of it. This is morally wrong, and some people are morally wrong. But I really do think that we're going to have to really, really do some strategizing in a big way on how we can make a difference in keeping folks out and putting people in. Because we got to prepare that generation who some of us have given up on, and I haven't, because there's something on the inside of them. If we don't build a bridge and connect with young people, we're not going to have anyone to pass the mantle to. And we can't go in it thinking that we know it all. But we got to give a space and a platform because things are changing rapidly. And they don't have the tolerance that we have anyway to put up with some foolishness that we put up with. It's not going to be that way.
That's right.
And so we're so close to a civil war, it's unreal.
Oh my gosh, you're so spot on, so spot on.
Yeah.
Pastor Rhonda Thomas, thank you for asking. Thank you honored this program by asking to be on tonight, and that's, let me just go as far as to say there's a standing invitation. We'll move a program whenever you want to come on and talk about the work that you're doing, the passion that you have, anything, we'll make it available. and just thank you so much. And I want to thank our many viewers. We've had a sizable audience tonight. It almost looked like the pandemic. We got a lot of our initial viewers. So glad to see you, Bernard, Mag, Phyllis, my sister. So glad to see so many, Curtis, so many of us back with us tonight. Next week, we're going to talk about, we're going to ask the question, what is this nation's fascination with a twice impeached, 4-time indicted, 2-time loser of a civil trial on the verge of being economically devastating right now? We're going to ask what's America's fascination. The underlying tone of that is, why is America so racist? Pastor Ron, God bless you and thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for listening to me go on and also making a space. So now you done open up a door, because 2024, I guess I need to just have a routine, because I think it's going to be so much to talk about. But thank you, Pastor, and God bless you.
Anytime, Pastor Ron, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. If it's got to be a once-a-month deal or it's an urgent thing, you just say it's here for you.
All right. I'm coming. I'm like Dion. I'm coming.
Come right on. Come right on. We're ready to receive you.
All right.
Listen, thank you all. This has been one of the greatest shows. We've come back after the summer, and the thing we like about Pastor Rhonda, she is so raw and so real, yet she's so spiritual at the same time, because it takes faith to do the work that she and others like her are doing. And we just thank you for being inspired. I'm so glad to see so many of my buddies from our generation that will help us take the fight, as we're inspired by people like Pastor Rhonda, to the next generation, and not just be complacent for where we are and say, okay, we're comfortable. No, we got to push it on. Tonight's dialogue brought to you by GoGigaCreations.com. We are so grateful. We'll see you next week. We're going to mess with DT. See you there. God bless. Be well this week, y'all.